chosen one, heaven has pressed pause on whatever dark night you thought would never end. Listen carefully, because what you assumed was permanent has just been declared finished. The weight you have carried, the cycles you thought could not be broken, the shadow that seemed to swallow every bit of your joy, none of that has the authority to write the last line of your story. When Jesus spoke the words, "It is finished," from the cross, he was not only marking the end of his suffering. He was announcing a verdict over every life that would ever belong to him, including yours, hundreds of years before you were born into the specific weight you are carrying right now. Jeremiah 1 verse 5 puts it plainly, "Before I formed you in the womb I knew you, before you were born I set you apart." Your identity was decided in light long before darkness ever got a vote in the matter. Every tear you have cried has already been recorded. Every night you tossed and turned, wondering if morning would actually come, heaven was not sleeping through it. What the enemy meant to bury you under is being quietly redeemed into something you will one day stand up and tell people about. You did not just survive. You were kept on purpose for a reason you have not fully seen yet. You may have noticed a strange restlessness lately, a sense that something has already shifted, even though nothing visible around you has actually changed yet. Trust that sense. It is not wishful thinking. It is your spirit catching up to a decision heaven already made. Here is what makes this different from ordinary comfort. When God says something is finished, he does not simply mean it is over. He means it has been transformed. The ashes of what you are grieving right now are already becoming the soil for what comes next. You are not merely making it through the night. You are stepping into a morning that has already started forming while you are still in the dark. Type "It is finished" if you receive that over your life right now. And stay through to the end, because this word is not only going to comfort you, it is going to hand you back your voice. 1. The night has ended. The voice of the Lord broke through. When God speaks, night has no argument. Darkness does not negotiate with the voice that made it in the first place. One word from heaven undoes what years of struggle worked hard to build, and you have been pressed under a shadow that felt permanent right up until the moment his voice was released over it. Night never decides when morning arrives. It has no actual authority to extend its own stay, and it never did. Job 38 verse 12 asks a question that answers itself. Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place? You have not, and neither has whatever has been oppressing you. Only one voice has ever had that authority, and he has already used it on your behalf. Genesis 1 verse 3 records the very first time that voice was used for exactly this purpose. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Notice there is no delay between the word and the result, no waiting period, no negotiation with the darkness already present. Light simply obeyed because it never had a choice in the matter to begin with. What you feel shifting inside you right now is not coincidence. It is the direct result of heaven speaking on your behalf, whether or not you can point to the exact moment it happened. When his voice moves, what was invisible starts becoming visible again. Slowly at first, the way your eyes adjust after stepping out of a dark room into daylight, blinking, unsure at first whether to trust what you are suddenly able to see. Here is something worth understanding about night seasons in general, because it changes how you carry the next one. They are never final. They are permitted only for a time, the way a guest is permitted to stay in a house that was never actually theirs to keep. What felt like an endless cycle was never designed to crush you. It was designed to train you, to strengthen exactly the parts of you that the coming season was going to require. You were never expected to fight that season alone, even in the stretches where it felt like no one else was in the room with you. 2 Chronicles 20 verse 15 carries the same reassurance into your specific fight. Do not be afraid or discouraged because of this vast army, for the battle is not yours, but God's. Your only real assignment during the hardest part was to remain steady while someone stronger handled what you genuinely could not. You survived what could have broken you, and that survival was never accidental. Some of you are still waiting for a dramatic sign that the night has actually ended, something undeniable, something you could point to and say there, that was the moment. Most transitions do not arrive that way. More often you simply notice, one ordinary morning, that the weight you carried into every previous day did not show up with you, not because you fought it off, because it had already lost its assignment. 2. Every tear was noted. God redeems what was lost. The same voice that commands the night keeps tender watch over your sorrow. Your tears were never wasted. They were being collected quietly, the way something valuable gets gathered rather than discarded. Psalm 56 verse 8 puts this in language almost too intimate to be comfortable. Thou tellest my wanderings, put thou my tears into thy bottle. Are they not in thy book? A bottle is a strange thing to keep tears in, unless the tears themselves actually mattered enough to preserve. Every drop you assumed disappeared into the silence was collected instead, catalogued, remembered by name. Pain often whispers that it is pointless, that it changes nothing and helps no one, least of all you. But in the hands of God, sorrow becomes seed rather than waste. What you released in private, sometimes at 3 in the morning with no one else awake to witness it, is being planted somewhere you cannot yet see the shape of. Psalm 34 verse 18 promises something specific about exactly this kind of pain. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Notice the proximity described, not eventually near. Close, in the actual moment of the breaking, not only after the healing arrives. There is a specific water stain a tear leaves on a pillow, long since washed away, the fabric giving no evidence anymore that a particular night ever happened at all. But the night is still remembered, even after every physical trace of it is gone. What your body forgets, heaven still holds. Notice how healing tends to move. It begins inside, quietly, long before it shows up anywhere visible. God restores the soul before he restores the circumstances around it, which means if your outside world still looks unchanged, that does not mean nothing has actually shifted. Something usually shifts on the inside first, and outward restoration tends to follow at its own pace, not yours. Consider what actually happens to grief that is allowed to move, rather than grief that gets frozen in place by shame. Frozen grief tends to leak sideways into everything else: irritability, exhaustion, a shortness with people who did nothing to deserve it. Grief that has been permitted to move, even slowly, even imperfectly, tends to soften over time instead of hardening. The difference is rarely the size of the original pain. It is usually whether the pain was ever given anywhere honest to go. Here is something practical to carry out of this section specifically. Grief that stays completely private for too long has a way of calcifying into something heavier than it needed to become. Choose one specific loss you have never said out loud to another human being and say it to someone this week, even briefly, even imperfectly. Naming it does not reopen the wound. It usually does the opposite. It moves the weight from something you are silently carrying alone into something that is finally shared, which is closer to what testimony actually is before it ever becomes a story you tell a crowd. 3. The chains fell. Condemnation has no claim. The record of every charge that could have been held against you was nailed to the cross. That is not a comforting metaphor invented to soften a hard truth. It is closer to a courtroom decree, formally entered, permanently on file. Romans 8 verse 1 says it as plainly as Scripture ever says anything. There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. No condemnation is not the same statement as reduced condemnation or eventual forgiveness pending good behavior. It is a complete legal category, closed. There is a real difference between a debt that has been reduced and a debt that has been erased, and the verse is describing the second one, not the first. Colossians 2 verse 14 explains what actually happened to the evidence that used to stand against you. God, having cancelled the charge of our legal indebtedness which stood against us and condemned us, he has taken it away, nailing it to the cross. Nailed, not filed away for later reference, removed from the record entirely, not simply overlooked. Some of you grew up believing forgiveness was something you had to keep earning back after every failure, a balance that reset to zero every time you slipped. That is not what this verse describes. It describes something closer to a debt paid once, in full, by someone else, with no installment plan attached and no fine print requiring you to keep proving you deserved it. Picture a case that has been formally dismissed by an actual judge, signed, sealed, entered into the permanent record. That dismissal does not get reopened just because someone in the parking lot outside the courthouse is still shouting accusations at you on your way to your car. Their volume does not carry any legal weight. The ruling has already been made, and no amount of shouting after the fact changes what the record now says. This is where most people quietly trip, because the feeling of guilt often outlasts the actual legal reality of forgiveness. You can be fully pardoned and still flinch every time an old accusation gets replayed in your own head. Feelings are real, but they are not rulings. Courtrooms do not operate on how the defendant happens to feel that morning. They operate on what was actually decided, and what was decided about you is finished, whether or not your emotions have fully caught up to the verdict yet. Try this the next time an old accusation resurfaces uninvited. Do not argue with it on its own terms, defending yourself point by point the way you might have a year ago. Simply state the ruling. That charge was already dismissed. Say it exactly like that, out loud if you can, because arguing with a dismissed case only gives it a courtroom it no longer actually has jurisdiction in. Something shifts once you actually start living from that ruling instead of constantly re-litigating it. Prayer stops feeling like begging for something you might not get. Risk stops feeling like gambling with a status that could be revoked. Both begin to feel more like communion and obedience flowing out of a position already secured, rather than desperate attempts to earn a verdict that was never actually up for negotiation in the first place. 4. The accuser is silenced. Weapons do not prosper. The voice that hunted you has lost its license to keep speaking. Revelation 12 verse 10 declares that the accuser has been thrown down, the one who accused you day and night without pause. Heaven has issued its ruling, and the courtroom that once echoed with your name, being dragged through accusation, has gone quiet. Notice something important here. The accuser did not stop talking because he ran out of material to work with. He stopped because he ran out of standing to bring the case at all. The charges might still sound familiar in your own ears, echoes of things that once genuinely stung, but they carry no actual authority anymore. Romans 8 verse 31 asks the only question that matters after that. If God is for us, who can be against us? Someone can still try. Trying and succeeding are not the same thing. This does not mean opposition disappears entirely. Weapons may still form. What changes is whether they prosper once they do. Many attacks fail simply because they collide with a covering already in place long before they ever reach you, the way rain never actually touches ground already sheltered under a roof. Here is a fair question worth answering directly rather than avoiding. If the accuser has truly been silenced, why do hard things still happen? Why do old accusations still sting when they resurface? Why does life still include real loss alongside real victory? The silencing described here is legal, not experiential in every single moment. The case against you has been dismissed permanently. That does not mean you will never again hear an echo of the old verdict being read aloud somewhere in your own mind. It means that echo no longer carries binding authority, even on the days it is loud enough to feel like it does. Your posture from here forward is authority, not apology. You are not walking through life hoping to survive whatever comes next. You are walking through it already secured by a verdict nothing can overturn, and that verdict comes with the right to stop shrinking every time something raises its voice at you. Something specific tends to happen the moment guilt actually loses its grip on a person. Worship gets louder, not because the person is performing gratitude for an audience, but because something that used to occupy that emotional space has simply vacated it. Silence where accusation used to live has to be filled with something. More often than people expect, it gets filled with genuine praise instead of the relief people assumed would show up first. 5. God crowns your endurance, ashes become beauty. What used to press you down is now being placed on your head as something closer to a crown. The weight that once bowed your shoulders is turning into the very thing that establishes you, and Psalm 8 verse 5 names this directly. God crowned them with glory and honor. That is not poetic decoration. It is heaven's actual response to what you endured while no one was watching closely enough to applaud it. Nobody clapped when you got up one more exhausted morning and chose faith anyway. No one saw the prayers you whispered through clenched teeth in a season that refused to make sense. But heaven recorded every single instance, weighing what you carried in secret, and what was weighed in silence is now being rewarded in the open. Isaiah 61 verse 3 promises something specific in exchange for exactly this kind of grief. God gives a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning. Ashes are what remains after something is completely consumed by fire. To human eyes, they signal only ruin. In God's hands, they are raw material, not an ending. There is something worth understanding about joy that has actually survived sorrow, rather than joy that simply avoided it. Joy that has never been tested tends to be fragile, dependent on circumstances staying pleasant in order to remain intact. Joy that has been through fire and come out the other side carries a durability the untested version never develops. It has already been proven under conditions that would have broken something less genuine. Consider the scar you have spent years angling away from the mirror without fully noticing you were doing it, tilting your head just slightly, adjusting the light, an old reflex from a time when that mark still felt like something to hide. At some point, without a dramatic turning point you can point to, you stop angling away. The scar just becomes visible again, unremarkable, no longer requiring management. That shift did not happen because the scar disappeared. It happened because you finally stopped believing it disqualified you from anything. This crown is not decoration, it is assignment. What your scars have earned you is not the right to be admired, but the responsibility to actually lead someone else through the same territory you already survived. Authority without humility distorts quickly. Authority carried with humility multiplies without you having to force it. Public honor tends to follow private faithfulness, though rarely on the schedule people expect. You may not have received recognition during your specific nights of weeping, and that absence does not mean the faithfulness went unnoticed. When the veil eventually lifts, it usually does more than restore you privately. It puts what you endured on display in ways that were never actually about your own glory to begin with. 6. The wilderness season was training, doors now open. What felt like delay in your life was not denial. It was formation, happening in a place you could not appreciate the value of while you were still standing inside it. God hid you in the wilderness not to waste your time, but to refine what needed refining. And closed doors in that season were mercy far more often than they were punishment. Revelation 3 verse 8 gives the promise attached to exactly this kind of season. I have set before you an open door that no one can shut. Notice this promise is entrusted specifically to people who have already been prepared enough to walk through it without collapsing under what waits on the other side. The wilderness has always functioned as God's training ground, not his punishment yard. Israel walked through one before ever entering the land they had been promised. David learned to worship in solitude, and to fight real danger without an audience. Years before anyone called him king, tending sheep in fields no one important was watching, fighting off lions and bears with no crowd to witness whether he succeeded or failed. Even Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness before his public ministry ever began. None of that time was wasted, even though almost none of it looked productive from the outside while it was happening. No craftsman hands a master key to an apprentice who has never been trusted with the simple ones first. The wilderness was never punishment. It was apprenticeship, the unglamorous stretch where you learned to handle small, unseen responsibilities faithfully long before anyone offered you something with real weight attached to it. Think of the specific doors that slammed shut in your face during that season, a job you did not get. A relationship that never became what you hoped. An opportunity that vanished before you even fully understood what it was. At the time it felt like rejection, plain and simple. In hindsight, most of those closures were protection. Psalm 23 verse 3 explains why. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Paths that are guided are not random, even the ones that felt like dead ends while you were standing on them. The doors opening for you now are not identical to the ones that closed before. These are coordinated with the actual formation you just walked through. Heaven waited specifically until you were steady enough to carry what waits beyond the threshold, and Joshua 1 verse 9 carries the same charge into your specific moment. Be strong and courageous, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Here is a discernment tool worth carrying forward, distinct from simply asking whether a door feels peaceful. Ask whether you are actually steady enough right now to carry what is on the other side of it, not someday, not once you feel more ready, but genuinely today. Some doors are real and still premature, not because they are counterfeit, but because the timing has not caught up to the invitation yet. Readiness and rightness are not always the same question, and confusing them is one of the most common ways people either force a door too early or hesitate at one that was actually already theirs to walk through. Not every open door deserves a yes either, and that caution matters just as much as the encouragement to walk boldly. An opportunity that requires you to abandon character, compromise integrity, or force your way past a resistance that keeps returning is rarely a door heaven actually opened. Wisdom and courage were always meant to walk through a threshold together, not one without the other. 7. Scars turn into authority. Your story becomes a bridge. What once wounded you has become the seal of an authority you did not choose but earned anyway, simply by surviving. The marks you used to cover are no longer proof of shame. They are proof that whatever tried to break you did not finish the job it started. Authority in God's kingdom rarely comes from theory. It comes from survival. Scars authenticate a voice in a way nothing borrowed from a book ever fully can. They say, without you having to explain anything, that you know what it actually feels like to bleed, and also what it feels like afterward to heal. Even Jesus, resurrected, glorified, fully capable of appearing in overwhelming radiance, chose to keep his wounds visible. Thomas had missed the first appearance, and when the other disciples told him what they had seen, he refused to accept a second-hand account, insisting he would not believe unless he could put his own finger in the mark of the nails and his hand in the wound at Jesus' side. A week later, Jesus appeared again, specifically for the one man still holding out. He did not rebuke Thomas from a distance for his doubt. He came close, held out his own hands, and said in John 20, verse 27, "Put your finger here, see my hands." The Son of God let a doubting friend touch the exact place where he had been wounded, because the wound itself had become the proof more convincing than any explanation could have been on its own. Notice what Jesus did not do. He did not hide the evidence of what he had survived in order to appear more impressive. He led with it. The resurrection was real, but the wounds were what actually convinced the one person still unconvinced. Sometimes what you consider the least presentable part of your story is exactly the part that will end up doing the most convincing. That same principle carried Paul through what he called his thorn, a weakness he asked God 3 times to remove and was told, instead in 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul did not receive removal. He received a different kind of strength, one specifically designed to work inside the weakness rather than eliminate it. A healed place in you becomes a pathway for someone still bleeding in the exact spot you once bled from. When you tell your story honestly, without performing it, someone listening recognizes the shape of their own pain inside it and realizes, often for the first time, that healing is not theoretical. Psalm 147 verse 3 describes exactly what happens next. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. That binding was never only for your comfort. It equips you to walk someone else through the same territory. This does not mean every private detail needs to be shared publicly or immediately. There is real wisdom in distinguishing between bleeding in public and testifying from a place that has actually finished healing. Testify from the healed place, not the open wound, and you minister life without accidentally reopening what has only just closed. There is a specific kind of empathy that only forms through survival, one no amount of second-hand study ever fully replicates. You now sense what someone in real pain actually needs, not in theory, but in the specific texture of lived experience. That sensitivity was not available to you before the wound. It became available afterward, once the wound had actually finished healing into something you could carry without it costing you anymore. 8. Restoration is real. Expect overflow. Grace does not only heal what already happened, it prepares ground for a restoration that exceeds what was originally lost. What you assumed was gone forever is not finished reappearing, and when it does return, it will not come back exactly as it left. Joel 2 verse 25 carries a weight worth sitting with. I will restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten. Not days, not moments, years. God does not merely patch small holes in a life. He reaches into entire wasted stretches and pulls fruit forward as though the barren season never actually happened at all. Job's story carries this same principle at a scale most people never fully absorb. In the span of a single day, messengers arrived one after another, each with worse news than the last, until Job had lost his children, his wealth, and eventually his own health, sitting in ashes, scraping his skin, friends offering explanations that mostly made things worse. He never received a full answer to why any of it happened. What he received instead was an encounter with God himself. And afterward, Job 42 verse 10 records that the Lord restored what Job had lost and gave him twice as much as he had before. Not a replica of his old life quietly handed back to him. Double. Heaven does not balance scales evenly. It tips them toward abundance every time. Notice what Job did not get before the restoration arrived. He did not get a tidy explanation that made sense of the suffering in advance. Sometimes restoration comes before understanding does, not after it. Waiting for full clarity before you allow yourself to hope again is not required, and it was never actually the order the story followed for Job either. Restoration is not confined to material things, even though that is usually where people expect to see it first. It reaches the hidden dimensions too. Joy you assumed you would never feel that easily again. Peace that seemed permanently fractured. Relationships you feared were too damaged to survive. Psalm 126 verse 5 captures the whole arc in a single line. Those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy. Your weeping was never separate from your harvest. It was the planting the harvest actually required. This kind of gift comes with a responsibility attached to it, one easy to miss in the excitement of receiving something back. Overflow was never meant for hoarding. When God restores, he often ties the restoration to a mandate to pour back out, to become a resource for someone else's breakthrough, the same someone way else's faithfulness likely became part of yours. Gratitude becomes protective rather than merely polite once you understand this. A restored life that forgets what the barren years actually cost tends to drift toward entitlement without meaning to, treating abundance as owed rather than given. Gratitude keeps the memory of the wilderness close enough to stay useful, not as a source of shame, but as a permanent reminder of exactly what generosity actually looks like up close. Picture the empty seat at your own table that has finally been filled again, whether by a person, a purpose, or simply peace where absence used to sit. Notice how quickly the new normal starts to feel unremarkable, almost as if the empty years never happened. Let yourself actually notice that shift instead of rushing past it the way you rushed past so much else while you were only trying to survive. 9. Now walk in authority. Resistance falls flat. The moment you were set free was never only about relief. It was about being positioned to govern something, not just escape something. You were not rescued only to survive whatever comes next. You were delivered so you could actually lead through it. Resistance is not proof that something has gone wrong. Often it is proof of exactly the opposite. Nothing bothers to fight where nothing is actually threatened. If pressure has increased lately, consider the possibility that it increased because you advanced into territory that used to belong entirely to darkness, uncontested. Ephesians 6 verse 11 instructs plainly, "Put on the full armor of God, so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes." Armor is not an occasional accessory reserved for especially hard weeks. It is daily attire, put on deliberately rather than assumed automatically. 1 Peter 5 verse 8 to 9 adds the necessary alertness underneath that armor. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith. Notice the lion still roars. What has changed is not the noise level, it is the teeth. A lion that has already been defeated can still sound exactly as threatening as one that has not, which is exactly why sober alertness matters more than fear ever did. Here is a simple practice worth carrying forward from this section specifically. Each morning, name one piece of that armor out loud before you actually need it, not as a ritual performed for its own sake, but as genuine preparation. Truth today, peace today, faith today. Naming it in advance means you are not scrambling to remember. It is available the moment pressure actually shows up. You are not walking into whatever is ahead alone, and you never were. Psalm 91 verse 11 promises, "He will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways." Heaven's armies are assigned to your path in ways you rarely get to see directly. Community matters here too. A person walking alone tires quickly no matter how strong they started out. A group of people walking the same direction sharpens, protects, and multiplies whatever ground gets covered. Authority is not license for recklessness. It is a mantle that comes with responsibility attached. Celebrate the freedom, but celebrate it with wisdom, remembering that authority is proven less in loud declarations and more in the quiet consistency of obedience. Nobody is applauding. Notice, too, the specific shift in your own voice when you finally stopped asking permission for things that were never actually anyone else's to grant. You started simply informing people of decisions instead of requesting their approval first. That is not arrogance. It is what it sounds like when someone stops negotiating with an authority that was theirs the entire time. What you carry now was never meant to end with you. Authority that stays contained to one life eventually stagnates. Authority that gets modeled reproduces, not through lectures about confidence, but through someone else watching. You stand steady under pressure and quietly deciding that steadiness might actually be available to them too. What follows now is not a suggestion, it is a summons. You are not being gently invited to consider stepping into freedom. You are being commissioned to walk into a finished work and let your life become visible exactly where shadows still linger for someone else. Freedom requires declaration to actually take root. What stays silent tends to remain unsettled in your own experience of it, even when it is legally already true. What gets spoken becomes established in a different, sturdier way. Mark 11 verse 24 puts weight behind speaking specifically. Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Your words are not neutral air. They carry actual weight into the reality you are walking through. Hebrews 11 verse 1 grounds this, so it does not drift into empty positive thinking. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. That confidence is not blind. It is aimed at something real, already accomplished, simply not yet fully visible in your circumstances. Speaking is not enough on its own unless your steps actually follow the words. Live inside the verdict rather than merely quoting it. Your daily walk is the proof that heaven's case concerning you has already closed in your favor, whether or not every person around you has caught up to that reality yet. What happens from here is not only about you, your life becomes a signpost for someone still standing exactly where you used to stand. They will watch how you endure, how you guard joy without needing anyone's permission to keep it. And something in them will find courage simply from watching that be possible. This is not a finish line you have crossed once and can now stop thinking about. It is a verdict you will need to keep choosing to live inside of, especially on the days circumstances make it easiest to forget. Vigilance does not undo the finished work. It protects the ground that work already secured. Before we close, let's bring this before God together. Whatever this message stirred in you, whatever old accusation it dislodged, whatever tears it finally gave language to, set it down for a moment. This is not a formality to rush through quickly. Let's actually pray it through, together, honestly, without hurrying to the end of it. Father, we come to you with hearts full of gratitude, aware that you were never absent from a single night we assumed we were surviving alone. We worship you simply for being who you are, unmoved by our worst seasons and undiminished by our best ones. There is a steadiness in you that our circumstances have never once managed to shake, no matter how hard they tried. Forgive us for the times we treated your patience as distance, assuming your quiet meant you had stopped paying attention. Rather than trusting, it meant something was being handled we could not yet see. We lift up the people in our lives still carrying weight they have not told anyone about. The ones who look fine on the outside while something real is happening underneath. Give us eyes to notice what they are not saying and give them courage to eventually say it. Thank you for the ordinary mercies scattered on through even our hardest seasons, mercies we barely noticed at the time because we were too focused on what still felt unresolved. We do not want to keep overlooking those simply because the larger prayer has not been fully answered yet. Teach us to hold what you have given us with open hands rather than tight fists, trusting that anything genuinely yours cannot actually be lost, only sometimes misplaced for a season we do not fully understand while we are living through it. We ask for the kind of courage that does not require an audience to be real, the sort that shows up in an ordinary Tuesday exactly as steadily as it shows up in a dramatic crisis. Build that in us slowly, however long it takes to settle in fully. Give us patience with the people around us who are still learning what we are only now beginning to understand ourselves. Let us extend the same grace toward their slowness that you have always extended toward ours, without keeping quiet score of who has grown faster. Guard our joy, Father, not from difficulty, which will keep coming regardless, but from the specific erosion that comes from comparing our lives to everyone else's highlight reel. Let contentment come easier to us with each season, not harder. Teach us to celebrate other people's breakthroughs without it costing us anything internally. without the quiet comparison that turns someone else's good news into a private measuring stick for our own lives. Their harvest was never proof that ours is delayed. Strengthen our roots before you multiply our branches. Let whatever we carry going forward be built on something deep enough to actually hold the weight of it, rather than something that looks impressive but has not been tested long enough to be trusted yet. Whatever comes next, let it find us awake, steady and unwilling to hand our peace back to anything that has already lost its legal claim on our lives. Let it find us grateful in the ordinary and faithful in the unseen, trusting that both matter to you exactly as much as the moments everyone else happens to be watching. In Jesus' name we pray, Amen. If this word met you exactly where you are, take a moment to like it and share it with someone still standing in the exact darkness you just walked through. Subscribing simply keeps this reach open for whoever needs to find it next. Darkness will never touch you again, chosen one, not because the fight is gone, but because the verdict already is finished. Walk in it,